I still have the voice of my mother in the back of my head saying, just get a good job.
When I immigrated to Canada, I found myself having to really take on the lead on my own and looking and feeling different. Really, there was a lot of insecurity struggling to fit in.
Entrepreneurship sounds intimidating. It can be scary to take a leap of faith and pour your all into your passion, especially knowing that it may not work out in your favor. But the good news is that it is doable. My first question to you, ladies, is as a woman entrepreneur, have you ever encountered moments of doubt or societal pressure that made you question whether economic freedom was worth pursuing? And how did you overcome those challenges in order to stay true to your aspirations and true to yourself? We are all immigrants to Canada. And so many of us, came to this beautiful country with our culture. And so while, many family members can be supportive, sometimes they can be the ones pushing us to doubt and to question ourselves, either we are doing the right thing into pursuing financial freedom. So Magda, what's your experience on this one?
Well, I grew up in a Colombian household, so I still have the voice of my mother in the back of my head saying, just get a good job, don't make any ripples, and just stay there until you are pensioned and you get your pension, and then you should be so lucky. And there was always something inside of me that that didn't sit well with me, right? I kept seeing all these people doing fantastic, wonderful things. And I just always felt like there had to be more than this. And so that got me basically into jumping from one job to another, right? One industry to another. I was always a risk taker in that aspect. But eventually I had to kind of really embrace what it is that my soul really was asking me to do, which was to go against the grain. And yes, when we start a business, especially if it's not a brick and mortar type of thing, right? Especially when it's something virtual or something a bit more innovative, it's very scary because it breaks the paradigms that we have been accustomed to, taught, that was the way. And especially as women either of color or minority, it's even harder, right? Like, who do you think you are? That's kind of like, why do you think you can do this, right? And so I don't know if it's the Latin blood in me or whatever, but you just have to dare me to do something and I'm going to do it 3 times bigger, 4 times bigger than that. And the beautiful thing is that when you have community like this, like wonderful women that know the magic they have inside of them and that they're due for more, it absolutely gives you kind of that momentum and that energy to push forward. So yeah, I completely can identify with everyone telling me, what are you doing? And then eventually life kind of slapping me and saying, listen, it's time. You either do this or you die, happily and satisfactorily, because it's not like having a 9 to 5. There's nothing wrong with having a stable job and a career in that. But it's not for everyone. And it's understanding when your calling is for, let's try something new, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mercy, what's your experience with that?
Well, I can so relate to Magda there. I think for me, I grew up as the youngest in a family of 7, right? So I was so dependent on my much older siblings to think for me, to speak for me. And I never really cared to find my own voice. So I just depended on them for life. When I immigrated to Canada, though, I found myself having to really take on the lead on my own and looking and feeling different. Really, there was a lot of insecurity struggling to fit in. So I had a lot of self-doubt. I did not understand my value. I just wanted to stay small and avoid the radar, just kind of stay under the radar, so to speak. But parallel to that, part of me that felt insecure, was not sure of itself, just did not want to be seen or be heard. There was another part of me that felt so strong, so ambitious, so driven, and wanted to make a change and an impact. So I found myself having this conflict within me, right? I have this passion, but I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. It brought a lot of anxiety in me, and self-doubt and self-critical. And that was very discouraging. So there was a tug of war going through me. So anyway, I went into school, social work.
Mhm.
I bumped into that by mere chance, really. Um, and oh my God, it just labeled everything that I was going through. It gave me a language, it empowered me, it gave me a sense of purpose. So I started working, with women. Dealing with domestic violence. I worked with people struggling with homelessness, people dealing with major illnesses such as stroke and cancer. I really enjoyed it. But throughout that, I realized that there was something we're not directly addressing is the mental health piece and how that was so important to address. So I decided to go and do my master's degree in clinical social work, specializing in mental health and trauma. And that really reignited my purpose, right? I had dealt myself with a lot of grief, losing three of my siblings and losing a child at birth, and I knew what it meant to wake up and not want to face the day. Um, so through my work, as I was working and addressing deeper mental health challenges, I was actually healing myself in the process.
Yeah.
And along the journey, I was privileged enough to be mentored by some of the best people in the field, right? It took breaking away sometimes from my normal group and taking the risk to meet with people that I normally don't socialize with, meeting with people who I aspire, who do things that I look up to, and that really helped me to break out of this shell, and that gave me confidence. And actually, I had to reach out to a therapist, even though I was a therapist at that point. I had to reach out to a therapist because these negative voices in my head that were telling me,
Mhm.
now, if you have nothing important to say, who do you think you are? No one will believe you. How dare you even think you could open a business? That was so loud that I had to seek a therapist who helped me really work through that, to kind of dig deep and say, where is this coming through from, and how can you work through that? And as I did that work, I started my own private practice just as a side thing on the side. But I was having success despite the negative voices in my head. I was having a lot of success. My clients were referring each other, their family members, their friends. I'm like, what's going on here? Something must be wrong with my thinking.
Hearing from your story, Mercy and Magda's story, sometimes we talk a lot about the environment and how you were raised and who you surround yourself with, which it does have an impact, right? But oftentimes we are our biggest obstacles, right? Because those voices in our head, we are the one either creating those voices or amplifying those voices, right? So that's very interesting to see how women, we are able, to even put more pressure on ourselves when actually we know, this is enough challenging like that. We don't need more stress. Garcia, I love your story. It's very inspiring. Like all the stories on this show, but yours really touched my heart. You came to Canada as an immigrant, like all of us. You used to pick strawberries for a living. And after we realized that no one would hire you without experience, you decided to focus on payroll and to develop your expertise on payroll. But what I like also about your story is that you decided to focus on learning payroll because you wanted to have a better understanding of the money you were making, the payroll that you were receiving. Now, a couple of years later, how long have you been in Canada?
I have been in Canada for over 30 years.
Okay, so now you have built a beautiful life, built a beautiful family, you are well established in Canada, and you work full time and have your own payroll and accounting company. And I think like we are full circle, right? When it comes to achieving economic and financial freedom, there is often a sense of responsibility to give back. I did it. I succeeded. Now, how can I give back? And so I would like to ask you, Garcia, how have you utilized your own success to support other women, other people in their pursuit of success and create opportunities for economic empowerment?
That's a great question. Coming here as an immigrant and picking strawberries, I have to tell you, it's not fun. When you have to go down on your knees, and then when you try to apply for a job in the industry and you're told you don't have enough experience, it puts a lot of self-doubt in my mind. And when I chose to focus on payroll, I wanted to become that master. I wanted to understand every parts of it, not just understanding your pay stub and how it works and the taxes. I wanted to be the best. Like, so there's every situation that is thrown at me, I wanted to figure that out. So when I see immigrants come into the country, for example, and they want to do payroll, they have absolutely no experience. It breaks my heart to tell them that you have to have some experience to be able to do payroll. So one thing I created is opening up a clinic. It's a tax clinic that prepares free tax returns for immigrants and Canadians, or if you're being incarcerated. And I've allowed people to come into the clinic and get that experience. So if you're just trying to branch out into accounting, or you're just trying to do payroll, I've allowed you to come in and get some experience, volunteer for a bit, and so that way you can use that experience. So for me, it means a lot in giving back that way, because these things don't happen anymore. And when I started in Canada, I didn't have these opportunities. So for me, it gives my heart so much joy to be able to give back. And I'm also setting an example for my children. I want my children to understand that you don't pass someone on the street, see that there's an opportunity to help them, and ignore it. I want to spread that. I want to just empower women. I want to empower people to know that there's so many opportunities, but if we come together and help each other, it will benefit in the long run. So it gives my heart great pleasure.
And a question, why have you decided to keep a full-time job and to have a side business? Is that because you like it this way, you love it this way? Listen, you have found your balance and you love it this way. Is that because you are still waiting for the right moment to transition full-time as an entrepreneur? What's the situation there?
Yes, that's a very good one. So I chose to do that because I have an obligation to help someone fulfill in the full-time employment. But I also want to have my business where I'm not in a rush. I'm not trying to be at the top, and I'm not trying to be bigger than anyone else. I'm just going to be different. So having a full-time job, it's a passion. It's something I love. So if someone comes and says, I need you to do this for me, but I want you to do it full time, I'm not going to say no, because I will do everything in my power to make sure that I'm helping. And it's a different concept from what I'm doing in my business, because it's still payroll, but it's more project work. So it's different from what I do in my daily business. So for me, that's an obligation to help someone. But having my full-time business as well, I'm also giving other people opportunities by coaching them and helping them to be successful, to be able to run my business.
Mm-hmm. When I hear the stories of other women, when I read women's stories, this is when I realize, damn, we are so strong. We are so powerful. And sometimes I feel like we don't even realize it. And by not realizing how powerful we are because of everything that we have been through and we are going through, it's like doing us a disservice. You see what I mean? So, Tara, let's pause and talk about your story a little bit. Because you are a full-time RVP in a tech company working in a male-dominated environment, but you also have your company where you focused on female empowerment. So you started working in your business, so in addition to your full-time job, because you believe that women can diversify their lives and they don't have to box themselves into one persona, which is what we love. Your driving force working in a male-dominated environment, seeing very few women, even though there are more and more women, we know that when it comes to leadership roles, there is fewer women. And sometimes when we get into a leadership role within a male dominated environment, we have a tendency, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us, we have a tendency to erase our feminine side and to behave like those men, because we do believe this is the way we should be leading. And I'm sure there is a lot that you can tell about it.
I've worked in tech for almost 20 years. I've been in tech for a long time, and currently I'm a regional vice president. So you've touched on a few things that might be relevant for the audience. But first, why, if you're having success in a career and you love what you do, would you want a side business? First of all, I do not accept the word side business, because if we are creating a business and a business of passion, it cannot be anything on the side. And this is one of the main things that prevent people from stepping into businesses or opportunities to serve when they're in a corporate career, because they have to view it as a side thing. And when I talk about diversification of the portfolio, what I mean by that is I have a full-time career that I adore and I love. And there are ups and downs like everything in life, but that teaches me about equanimity and it keeps me balanced. But in addition to the career I love, there's a lot more of me to give. So that's why I started my business. I wanted to take everything that I've learned and has been successful in my career and enable others to leverage it. And if we're going to talk about diversity in the workplace, and we're going to talk about diversity of women at the table and other cultures at the table, we also should be able to have that diversity within ourselves and understand that we're complex beings. So on one side of me, I might love the work I do as an RVP, but on another side, I'm called to serve. And when I'm called to serve, that's where my business comes in. I can take what I've learned and give it back to those who want to create a professional career, whether it's as an entrepreneur or in a business like myself, but also to understand how those things are woven throughout your entirety of your life, because we are always put into boxes. And if we can learn how to step outside of that box and step into expansion, then we can create the life we really want. And that doesn't matter if we're a caretaker, if we are a RVP, or if we're leading and managing our household. All of these are extremely important roles. And we have to, as women, understand that we can be all of it. We don't have to split or departmentalize ourselves. And the final thought there is, when you talk about burnout, where the burnout comes in is where we step into these roles inauthentically. And when we show up as leaders, we are exhibiting things we've been taught, which generally comes from a different gender or genre than ourselves. And we're trying to emulate that back. And this is particularly important for immigrant women in business, because not only are they dealing with being a woman, but that being an immigrant, they feel as they are the minority. So they want to emulate what the majority is doing. And that's constantly taxing on the nervous system that puts their fight or flight into play. And they are living inauthentically. So it really is what brings them into this burnout mode and sucks the life out of them, as opposed to having their cup overflow and having a lot to give.
Yeah, and that's very interesting, actually, what you're saying. A follow-up question I have for you is, we know that we can do it all, maybe not at the same times, depending on what success is to you, right? What's your own definition of success when it comes to either growing a successful career, which is your case already, and having a business. So I'm not going to use the term side business, because I agree with you. Like, it's not something that we do on the side. We don't have to make a choice. We can do both as long as it fulfills us. But one of the key to success on both sides, corporate and entrepreneurship, requires a strong network of support. And sometimes I feel this is where a lot of women, and especially immigrant women, struggle with, right? Because we are so used to do things by ourselves. We are smart, we are competent, we can do it, that we forget sometimes that, spending time and energy into building a support system is also the key in order to be successful without having to exhausting ourselves over it. Can you share with us examples of how you have used mentorship, collaboration, networking to foster your own success and economic growth?
Absolutely. So I think the first and most important thing is to understand that we have to value ourselves as what we bring to the table. We all have our gifts. So once we acknowledge our gifts, we then feel that we can share them. And when we share them, that is what entices others to share their own. And in that, that's where networking becomes so important. So being part of the IWB, the reason I chose to do that was, again, to take the success that I've seen but also the struggles I've seen as being a woman from a diverse background, a mixed background, being a female in the tech industry, one of 5 and the only girl in my demolition-based family. All of those things taught me lessons that I wanted to share. And the IWB platform gives us that networking opportunity to share and provide guidance to other women. And as much as we give, we are receiving, because it is this reciprocal energy that goes back and forth that enables us to lift one another up when we're having difficult times. We all go through ebbs and flow in life. Nothing is ever perfect. Perfect is an illusion. So to be able to hold space for women and to be able to make women who feel less than because they're not the majority understand that all of us have those feelings of inadequacy. It's bringing it to consciousness. It's being able to work through it and provide space for others to work through it that ultimately is going to be what helps empower us and change the world.
It can be that simple, right? It can be that simple. But sometimes we like to overcomplicate things. Thank you, Tara. Magda, I'm getting back to you. You were a full-time employee who suffered corporate burnout as well during the pandemic. You became horribly ill with panic attacks and debilitating migraines. And I'm sure for many of you watching and listening to us, you will relate, right? Many people, many of us went through a lot during the pandemic. And so you took that leave of absence actually, and it was challenging for you. But that was also an opportunity to reignite your passion. And where it becomes interesting, and I can say you are a warrior. You were educated as a psychotherapist first, right? This is how
Yes.
you started your career. And unfortunately, you were assaulted. And so you decided to leave your practice while you needed time to heal. But that led to even more trauma. You went through 2 divorces, gaslighting, infertility, etc., until this last breakdown, so the burnout due to the COVID-19, that allowed you finally to give you the grace to come full circle with your experiences and wisdom to become a life coach. It makes me think of Garcia's stories when, we go through so much struggle in our life, but there is one point in time, at a moment in our life, where we come to realize that, oh, okay, this is who I was meant to be. This is my calling. Everything that have been through has helped me to empower myself in a way that can empower others. So tell us a little bit more about your process. Did you have like a light bulb, a aha moment, and this is it, now I get it? Or was it a progressive process when you came to realize, okay, this is my calling, this is my purpose?
I'm a very stubborn woman. And so life afforded me beautiful opportunities to grow awareness in my life. So every time something big would happen, whether it was my parents divorcing, whether it was the assault, I also suffered from bulimia for over 20 years. There was a lot of self-hatred that was happening in my life. And I'm an ever student, so I was always learning. And once I got out of my psychotherapy practice, I got a bit frustrated with my psychotherapy because I felt that the way that we had been taught lacked a certain amount of holistic type of elements, because we are human beings, right? And so I am much more than what's going on in my head. And there's a lot of studies now about how much the mind-body connection is so important to be able to consider in order to be able to really address everything that's happening in your life. But for me, I had moments of awareness. And then, to be honest with you, that burnout that I had was my body absolutely breaking down. The first time I had a panic attack was just like in the spring of 2020. And I thought actually I was having a stroke is what was happening. My whole left side of my face went numb. My left arm, everything went numb. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should call the ambulance. At that time, I remember everyone here was saying, don't go to the hospital because you might get COVID and die. I mean, there was so much fear mongering happening that I didn't really know what to do. Anyways, obviously I didn't die, thankfully, but it got me, it just got progressively worse. If I got diagnosed with migraines, but what was happening underneath, and what Tara was talking about, is kind of that somatic type of, you keep resisting who you really are, and you are going to find yourself in front of a brick wall. And I'm thankful that finally my body was able to give me the message that I needed. So it wasn't so much of an aha moment as a, like, you're going to stop or you're going to die. Those were my choices. And I have a love of life. I want so much to experience so many things, and service has always been in me. It's something that I want to share. And every time I had, either when I was raped or assaulted or whatever it is that was happening, I always felt like there's got to be something, there's got to be a blessing somewhere in here. And like many of these women have talked about, when we are in struggle, when you're in the struggle, when I was in the middle of my panic attacks, I absolutely did not feel like there was a purpose to them. However, when I allowed them to flow and I allowed the information to come from the moment, I realized that there was wisdom within it. And speaking about, understanding what your resources are around you, understanding and intentionally building community around you, I can say, for one, Tara was monumental for me. She helped me along in those years, those last 3-4 years that were very difficult in my life. And it's like a mentor like herself, or a coach, or a neighbor down the street. You have no idea how these conversations, how sharing a moment with someone can really open my mind. And as women, yes, and I think you alluded to this, Darine, is we think we have to do it by ourselves. I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to, I should be able to handle this. There's an embarrassment also that for some reason happens inside of us, that, I can't be broken. I got bills to pay. I couldn't take a leave of absence. It took me almost a year after my doctor kept begging me, literally, Magda, you've got to take a leave of absence or this is going to get much more serious. And I resisted it because without my job, then who am I? Without my management position, then who am I? Without being able to bring, I was the major breadwinner in my home. Who am I? And when I took the leave of absence, I actually got worse before I got better, because it took me close to about 1.5 years to finally unclench and begin to give myself the freedom to see the possibilities. And that's where the love again came back. And I thought, wow, this is it. Like, this is why I've been struggling, is because maybe it's not psychotherapy, but it's something related to this. I need to be in contact with people, with women specifically, who are moving through this beautiful kind of chrysalis phase of reinventing themselves, allowing themselves the permission, like Tara says, to expand. She talks a lot about this too, like allowing yourself to move beyond the paradigms and the box that we have been placed in, because that's what's getting us sick. That's what makes us miserable. That's what stagnates us, right? And so now I can say, yes, I've had an aha moment, but it didn't feel like that as I was going through it. And it's thankful to the resources I had around me and the community that was building around me that I was able to survive it and now thrive through it.
As a full-time entrepreneur,
yes,
helping other women
yes.
go through their own mess so they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is wonderful.
Exactly.
Thank you for the great work that you are doing, Magda.
No, it's a pleasure.
Merci. So I like it because we have 2 full-time employees with an entrepreneurship with a company, and then we have 2 full-time entrepreneurs, right, who have taken the leap of faith. So Mercy, when did you realize that it was time for you to transition? You briefly talked about it earlier, like from your full-time job to becoming a full-time entrepreneur. Why you thought that you couldn't keep both? Or what was the motivation behind jumping into the world of full-time entrepreneurship?
Right. I think I was way ready way before, and I was resisting it, right? Because I didn't believe that was meant for me. I never dreamt that I would become a businesswoman, even though from an early life I knew I had a drive and a passion to do something impactful. But as I was working, like I worked for great organizations, I really enjoyed it. But I think I was becoming increasing, and I felt I really enjoyed it and felt equipped. But there was this side of me that wanted more autonomy and a bigger platform to really shape and influence. The programs and the services that we're providing to meet the mental health needs of people. So that need for that to make a bigger impact and influence is what finally pushed me to do that. And also I couldn't balance both, right? I was getting really really busy in my private practice, but this desire to say, you know what, I think I have, Magda, you're talking about some of the shortcomings of our training and things like that, and I was experiencing that as well. And my response to that was, you know what, I think having worked in this area for over 10 years at that time, I think I've learned what works and what doesn't work, and I just needed the time and the space and the autonomy to develop that, and that's what I did. And in that process, really connecting with mentors, that has been a key for me. Partnering with communities, I partner with indigenous communities, and reimagining what does therapy look like in that context, and how can we make it accessible to anyone, and thinking about, as a business owner, given